here my first time visiting. I love that the snow switched on. I know you all wanted to end, but we've been going cross country and this is our first sign of winter, almost. And I'm so grateful to Erin for joining me. It feels like this whole adventure, the book tour thing, feels like a dream. And I'm pinching myself. We're really here. This is happening. So thank you all for coming out on a miserable snowy Sunday. I'm really, I'm here to celebrate this book that I published just over a week ago. It's called The Language of Trees, and I'll explain a little bit about it, but I shout out to this beautiful book, A Darker Wilderness. I got my copy before the book tour, so I had a lovely companion as I was journeying. And it's also, in a way, it's similar to my book in that it's an anthology, it's a collection of voices, it's about community, maybe not necessarily trees and forests are mentioned, but it's about humans being on planet Earth together and what can we do as community, because we're all individuals, but we can't do anything without others. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about books, is that you can kind of bring a lot of people from different places together, and they're all contained in a magic little unit that you can hold in your hand. You can tell, like, I'm a book geek. So a little introduction maybe to what The Language of Trees is about. It's based on a book that I made. It started years ago, really, but in 2015, I created a tree alphabet, thinking and you'll see some of the images here share some of the tree alphabets that I made originally for that book. It was called About Trees. Each letter of our Latin alphabet was replaced by a tree drawing that I made. So I worked with a designer, and we could turn my tree drawings into a glyph. So when you type, you can download my fonts from my website. When you type A, the apple tree pops up on the screen. And so here are some of the tree drawings that I started making when I was in New York on a Fulbright back in, it was 2004, interested in nature. Like this very simple, seemingly little word, what is our relationship with nature? And I figured I needed to be in a city. I'm from rural Ireland. I don't know, some of you might hear my accent. I forget I have it. But I feel like in order to, because I understand my relationship with nature and the world growing up with my hand in the dirt. My mum was a gardener, planting, that cycle of you plant something, you sow the seeds, it germinates, it grows, you harvest, you weed, and then you consume and you compost in this loop. And I was born in 75, so the relationship to everything was way different. Like, things have speeded up, right? In these 40 plus years, our whole planet and our species is moving at light speed. So we've kind of lost that disconnection. We used to go to the creamery, for example, to get our milk, and we didn't have that many imported things. It was the 70s, right, in Ireland. Avocados, shrimp, all of this stuff was brand new. It was kind of famous, posh to have prawn cocktail, and things like this were really new. Now you can get all of this stuff everywhere, no matter where you are. So just in my short lifespan, some people would say it's not so short. Okay, I'm in my 40s. But that we've changed, our species has changed so much on this planet. Every biological system has been affected by us. We're now in this state of emergency. We're in a new era. We've moved from the Holocene. Woo! Sorry, I hope you could hear me babbling before now. So we've moved from an era that, when I went to school, we were told we were in the Holocene, and now we're in the Anthropocene, so the era of man. So our species has affected everything on this planet. And in a way, to celebrate that, to celebrate is not the right word, but you know what I mean, to acknowledge it maybe, I thought, okay, well, if I create this tree alphabet, it's a way to acknowledge my relationship maybe with language, to offer something to others, a way to give. I like with my work to be able to give things for free, and in the art world, Jordan in my introduction mentioned all of these museums where I've shown my work. Museums don't tend to like to give things for free. The art is on the walls, you can have that experience, but you can't usually touch or take the things with you. But along the way, I've always liked producing books, printed matter, sharing knowledge and information and gifting things, and I find with little booklets and zines you can do that. It's a very accessible way to give and to share. So I thought, okay, if I make an alphabet with these tree drawings, because I started making them when I was doing this Fulbright research into nature back in 2004, 2005, that was these tree drawings. A lot of people would email and ask to use the tree drawings to make tattoos, to make posters, a lot of tattoos. And it was just, it felt like a no-brainer in a way. I've got to make these tree drawings accessible, and the font seems really kind of set. It took 10 years to realize, right, between 2005 and 2015. So that's with a lot of, and in the book too, there's a lot of deep time, tree time thinking. You might do something, and you might not realize it maybe for a decade or more what it is you're doing or where it came from. Anyway, so I made a tree alphabet to make that book about trees, and that was 2015. The small edition, it was like a limited edition artist book, and Chris, there's somebody here, Chris Fishbach, heard about that book and was interested in, like, oh, we've got to make it, and we knew, as soon as, before it was even printed, we knew there was so much interest in that book about trees that we needed a bigger print run. It seemed to capture people's imaginations, and it took a long time. The publishing is complicated, some of you know that. And so, long story short, at the beginning of last year, I got a message from Maisie Cochran, who's an editor at Tin House, saying, I want to make a beautiful book about trees. During lockdown, she realized she was seeing trees for the first time and how much they were helping and supporting her with everything she was going through, the way most people started seeing birds or hearing birds and other species. And so that's kind of how this book came about in the last year. It's been a whirlwind of going back to this book about trees and then bringing in new voices, new people. So it's a whole collection of poetry, stories, essays translated into this font about trees. So each text, you know, if it's a long essay, it's got a dense forest, it's about translation, but it is at the heart of it about people. So even though it's called the language of trees, and it's obviously about trees, for me it's really about who are we right now. The 2015 one, yes, about trees, was my way of celebrating my 40th birthday. That was a secret, nobody knew that, but it was like a time capsule. It's like, okay, what can I share from my 40 years on the planet? So it was a way to think about the past, present, and future. And I think with a lot of the work, and it's also true, I think, in Erin's book, that this present that we're in right now, I think we're more and more aware that what we are doing right now is writing the future, right? That everything we do has an impact and has an effect way beyond ourselves in this moment, and that we are, so for me, this tree time is really important, to think more in a circular way of timekeeping rather than this linear ABC or 1, 2, 3, past, present is now, forget about. I think it's kind of broken wrong. The way a lot of everything is kind of broken, we need to change all of these systems. So in a playful way, I offered the tree alphabet as a way to kind of offer a gift that people can translate their own words into woods and rewrite, rewild for words and ways of thinking. So that's a very quick whirlwind run through of the tree alphabet. It's kind of complicated because as soon as I had that book about trees and I held it in my hand, I realized, oh, if we made the tree alphabet specific to a certain place, like they call them planting palettes, you have the trees that are happy in this wherever you are, you can plant your words and messages. So then I realized I've got to do that. So I obviously, you know, I'm Irish. I really wanted to make an Irish tree alphabet. So on these images that are scrolling, the Irish tree alphabet makes an appearance. But because I was in New York, I ended up making the New York City one first. So the original tree alphabet is used in the book, but the New York City one was made with the Parks Department, with foresters. So we have a planting palette. So we can plant messages, and then we did the same with the Irish one, but I ended up making that one during lockdown in 2020, so it was a very strange, the way everything was in 2020. So this is the Irish tree alphabet here. So I'm trying to think how to gracefully jump from all of this.
I have some questions if you want to.
Oh, sure, yeah, because I want to talk about this.
Well, my collection, my book is also an anthology, and so I was wondering about your approach to anthology and if there were any surprises in in the assembly of the pieces?
Oh, surprises. Well, if anyone has a copy and you just flick through this book, it's such a collection of, one person gave me one word, and then other people gave me like 2,000 word essays or longer. I'm not good with numbers. So the surprises were, I guess I've made a lot of books in printed matter, but having the parameters of a publishing house where everything has to happen within a set time frame. So that was a surprise that I was able to do it, I guess, that it happened, that we have this book. It was kind of like a miracle, because it's very, as you know, complicated. Obviously the permissions, I could spend 2 hours just talking about getting the permissions for everything. So it's all included, like the family tree of the book is included in the sources section. Because if I have this image here of the Sunday salons. So the book really grew out of Dylan, my partner, who's doing tech support. We were hosting salons on Sundays to bring people together to talk about art and activism in the Anthropocene and the possibilities. And it was so a lot of my work does happen through conversation, and it was at that time that the book started happening, and the tree alphabet. And why did I bring this up in relation to the surprises in the book? Oh, yeah, so I was going to say that, so a lot of what's in the book happened naturally. It was through reaching out to people I had already worked with, or that I had a relationship with, or that we'd done something together, or we just, shared meals or something. And I said, hey, I'm working on this tree alphabet book project. Would you like to share something? And it was always yes. There were I could say there were 2 or 3 no's. But everybody wanted to share, and it was often existing work, just because at the time it all happened so quickly. There are a few essays that were written specially for the book, like Ogham. Ogham is the Irish tree alphabet. It's like the 5th, O-G-H-A-M is how you spell this word Ogham. It kind of sounds like the meditative original sound of the universe, maybe. But Ogham was like 5th century medieval alphabet, called a tree alphabet because a lot of the characters we think were named after trees. And so Angus, for example, wrote an essay specially on that. So surprises, I'm not really answering. Just that it's a lot of work, and what's overwhelming, and maybe that's a surprise, is how generous people are. That people would say, I reach out and everyone's busy, right? Everyone's way too busy and moving too fast, but that people would say yes and help in whatever way they could. So it's just this generosity. And I find, as a visual artist, I'm always having to reach out. And I've made public art projects like the Tree Museum that pops up here, and it's always, the goodness of people that comes through. And so that's surprising, because people have so much else going on. They could easily say, Katie, calm down, go away, leave me alone.
I did want you to look over your shoulder, because we're having that snow globe snow that, just so you can see it. Okay. I'm not sure it will be there when we're done.
We're in the snow globe.
We are inside of it. In the creation of A Darker Wilderness, also had the issue of it having visual components to it, and also, so all the essays in my collection are original to the collection, or I asked them to write it, and they started writing, except for one, which was a revisiting of an earlier essay, and like an expansion on that essay, but was a challenging time to ask Black writers to write about anything, because we started the project before the pandemic, before the uprising, and I know as a Black writer I was asked to contribute writing more than I'd ever had before, and to write about a very, very hard thing in the midst of a very, very hard thing. It was really, really a challenging time to write. So, and that was shared by all the other people in the collection. And so we had to expand the timeline of the collection a bit, just because I wanted them to write long essays. And I was asking a lot of poets to write long essays, which it's my favorite kind of essay.
It's a miracle book.
And I really pushed them to go longer. So anyway, I know about everyone was enthusiastic, but to get to the finish line was a challenge for sure, because folks were having very complicated relationships to the places they were, and their relationship with the outdoors and all that stuff. Yeah.
But the one thing that really is, you said it was maybe the beginning. I can't remember how you phrase it in the book, but that the prison writing that Jordan mentioned that in his introduction, that's maybe at the heart of it, or where the book grew out of.
Yeah. So I was teaching with Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop, and they asked if I could propose a new class because I taught the same thing, and I've been teaching like nonfiction or like memoir writing in facility, and they asked for a new thing, and I was like, well, I think I could do like a science and nature writing class. That seems fun to me. I'd be interested in thinking about that. And at the same time, I was in an artist in residence with Coffee House Press. Thanks again, Chris. At the Anderson Library at the U, and I was there with the Givens Collection, which is a historical archive of African American literature mostly. And so it sort of was this culmination at once where I was working with students at Faribault Correctional here in Minnesota, thinking about nature. And every day of that class, I was surprised by the ways that my definitions of nature were expanded and challenged, because they were finding nature everywhere. They were finding nature in their cells, in those rooms that were inhuman and they weren't natural, less than nature, right? Because it's, pretty soulless place. So it was exciting to me to think about how it was real and present for them, in addition to all the ways that their memories of time in nature were these opportunities for meaning making and writing. And so I thought I took that sort of core idea to bring together archival objects, to really think about the historical and significant relationship of Black folks to nature, that our presence in nature and our relationship with nature has been here since before we were a nation, and the ideas of liberation, freedom, is at the heart of nature writing, I think, and at the heart of the question around Black folks in the U.S. And so I brought that together with the idea that we just need to push the boundaries of our definitions of nature, that nature is a political space that we need to contend with, I think.
Yeah, beautiful. Did you want to read?
Oh, I can. You're going to read from first?
I can read, yeah, but I'm not really a writer.
I was trying to think of where would be good. So my essay in the collection is about the time that I spent living on an urban farm in Buffalo, New York. I spent 10 years there. I left here, Minnesota, in my early 20s, heartbroken in lots of ways. I'd been working for Paul Wellstone staff, and so experienced great loss of a person that I really respected, and lots of friends and mentors. And I didn't know what to do. And I'd been kicked out of Christian college for being queer. And so I didn't know where to go. Anyway, I said yes to a very random experience in Buffalo, working in the mayor's office, which was the worst job I've ever had. But I thought that I'd be there 9 months, and then I was there 10 years, and it was really hard to leave by the end of 10 years. So the essay, it uses a structure that's borrowed from farmers' almanacs. So I was in the archival research I was doing, I got really fascinated with garden club roles and the history of garden clubs and gardens, because I like gardens. And I started reading farmers' almanacs, and then fell in love with Benjamin Banneker, who I'd heard of before but didn't really understand how freaking rad he is and was. He has a connection to Buffalo because the Ellicotts, who got the credit for designing Washington, D.C., the road plan of Washington, D.C., also designed Buffalo. And it's really this beautiful radial system. The city hall is in the very center of town, and all the streets go off of City Hall in all the directions. And some people think Benjamin actually did most of that work for both those cities, and they got the credit for it. But anyway, so it brought me back to Farmers' Almanacs and to Benjamin Banneker. And my favorite parts of Farmers' Almanacs are the Best Days calendar, which is like horoscopes for farmers. And it tells you the best days to cut your hair or shear a sheep or plant a tree that is going to grow fruit. And so I started thinking about what the best days are for an urban place and for an urban garden. And so that's the structure that holds this essay. I'll just read a little bit of it. Right. An old man who lives on the street walks past each day on his way to or from his errands, until one day he stops and waves over the teens to tell them how he carried seeds in his pocket when he came over from Sicily, how he still harvests those pears and apples in his backyard, even after his wife went to be with God. He crosses his heart and kisses his thumb. A Doritos bag, tumbleweeds, rolls end over end. The shiny bag holds tight a wooden paint stick used to mark the black rim heirloom tomatoes, and the black cherry heirlooms begin. Wrapped around the row marker is a weave, ratty black hair, ripped violently in a tussle. The black woman's face vaselined, her earrings handed to a friend. The catalpa tree, which by the way is the tree I would be if I was a tree. Because they flower, they have these gorgeous big like elephant looking leaves, and they have these super violent, awesome spikes. Seed pods that anyway, they're my favorite. The catalpa hurls her long spear-shaped seed pods toward the warm earth, ambitious and ill-prepared for childbirth. Most of her babies won't live. Sure, there are squirrels and aphids and mites and lacewigs. And one summer, there were these days of bloated rat bodies escaped after a meal of green foam poison to die belly up in the sun. But the 8-year-old boys who come wielding sticks, imagining, like boys do, other lands and other times, their feet trampling rows of beans are the worst, because you can't blame them. The city park that sits across the street is not for them. The park is broken glass and condoms, not a place to imagine someplace else. Some people believe Banneker was descended from the Dogon people who knew of Saturn's rings, had counted moons, and had identified the Sirius and Sagittarius and Sorghum stars. That perhaps his kin had survived the horrors of the belly of the ship from the land of the Portuguese called Costa de Pimenta, the Pepper Coast. That his name is derived from Banca, for his grandfather, or Banca, for the place in West Africa that would later be called Liberia, for its promise of freedom for America's formerly enslaved. He wrote his first almanac in Ephemeris in 1792, followed by 5 more years of almanacs, which featured natural and scientific writings such as tide tables, weather forecasts, and solar and lunar eclipse and growing schedules, as well as political commentaries, poetry, and proverbs. The number of almanacs feature a best days calendar, chronicling in relation to the moon's phases, which day provides the ideal conditions for different activities. For example, the best days calendar in the 2020 Old Farmer's Almanac notes that April 23rd is a better day to cut your hair to encourage growth, to color it, or to harvest above ground crops than any other day in that month. The period when the dark face of the moon fills up with light to fullness, is the time to do activities requiring strength and virility in order to make things grow. If you want to slow growth or to harvest a thing growing too quickly, the waning moon, April 23rd, is the best. The hood has best days too. Days at the beginning of the month when wit comes through, and days when money needs to stretch, when we share our bounty without needing to be asked. The Haudenosaunee, the Longhouse people, the stewards of this land, look to the sky and told of a woman there who took her sons, the moon and the stars, and nursed them on her breasts. She is the one who placed the light in the darkness. How does time and observation work in the hood? Does an urban area have its own rhythms, its own calendric energy. Measure the time between Puerto Rican Day Parade Festival, this neighborhood's own red, white, and blue. The teams clamoring over each other, climbing the grease pole, their race to the top, to the sausage. And the day snowflakes tumble after gathering in cirrus clouds over the lake, blanketing the city in a quiet stillness. I'll leave it.
It's so beautiful. It's really beautiful. Thank you. And inadvertently, it sort of does tie in again, not to bring it back to my own book, but I opened with Winona the Jukes.
So please do.
But I hadn't thought about that until you were reading Winona the Jukes piece on the Ojibwe New Year that she'd written last April, 2022. So, woo! What day is today?
The 16th? It's today. Last year today.
Woo! Where's Winona now? There's something in because we're talking about time, and this is one of those voodoo moments when the universe opens up and all the stars have aligned. That's really strange. But so this is the very first piece after Roskay generously wrote the introduction, and then I have the tree alphabet, and then Winona writes about the fact that our calendars are all wrong, to go back to broken time again. So we have calendars named after emperors, and what's that got to do with anything? So again, we need to scrumple it up, chuck it away, and start over. How can we do that? How do we change the system? Like, you've worked in prisons with people who are living in and as you said, they're seeing nature in ways that I think others don't, maybe because they're not there. But obviously, that system has to change.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the making new language or new ways of talking about things, thinking about the ways that we create language, and is one of those ways, because I think, language is one of the delivery vehicles of the future. I think the ways that we crack it and build it and make new words and pull things apart and learn cooler ways to say things we want to say. So I think language is a place to be when we're thinking about breaking our notions of time. But I think we're in this right time because the pandemic completely, time doesn't work anymore. It's not timing the same way. When people are like, how long ago was that? I don't know. It was 6 years or maybe 2 weeks ago. I really don't know. And so I think we need it. So I think when we're grasping for stuff as a community, as a large global community, I think we're going to innovate into new ways of thinking about time. And I think that feeling that roundness where you're revolving and you look at yourself at another time and have a revelation, or you meet yourself again, or there's those moments where it feels like serendipity or chance or luck or something special. I think noting those things I think we should do it more.
And stories, right? So poetry, storytelling. So this was one thing that came up over and over and over again at the salons that we would have when we were together, trying to come up with solutions. We were trying to fix basically the climate emergency. We're trying to fix planet Earth with our little Sunday afternoon gatherings over coffee and cake. And all these conversations, we kept ending up with storytelling. We need new stories, or we need to go back and find the creation stories that we've forgotten. Being Irish, I grew up with myths. Ireland is riddled with myths and fairy people. You might have heard of, some people call them leprechauns. That's different to the actual fairies. Fairies are real. Leprechauns aren't real. But they were that was dismissed and kind of pushed underground and hidden, the way the Irish language was pushed aside when the British came. And so this pushing aside and trying to demolish or just eradicate a whole culture or people was a fundamental part of who you are as an Irish person. But then you when I say you, I mean we sort of wrote it out ourselves, because these myths were kind of dismissed. It was like, oh well, that's not real. Those myths are just silly, in the olden days, they used to believe those things. And I think now we're circling back around. I know I am, and I feel like there's this movement to find, refine, and reread, and relearn all of these stories that are so fundamental to who we are. As Irish people, and I think this is not just happening in Ireland, it's happening everywhere, to remember and basically run with it. So I'm hoping I have this secret wish. This was one of my pandemic projects, was try and read all of these myths again that they're so embedded in part of my, at a cellular level, the part of me, and draw them out. So I was trying to draw these fairies and the mythic characters. They sort of overlap with some of the more universal ones, but it's a larger project. It felt like I can't do this quickly, and I was tied up trying to make explorers' guides to the tree alphabets. This was a big part of my time, was to try and reach into the classrooms. So this was, with the Tree Museum, sorry Erin, you can't really see, but that was the haiku hike, where we went into classrooms with the Tree Museum project and took kids out of the classroom, physically took them outside into the park, and you could see, behind their eyes, you could hear their brain twirling and spinning around in a different way. And it sort of blew their minds, and it was so powerful. It was really beautiful to see how that simple act of just leaving the classroom and being outside to listen and look, and then maybe write a word, goes back to poetry again, was so incredibly special. So again, the tree school, I do feel like education is a huge part of what I should be doing.
Yeah, I think that when working with kids on this urban farm, we definitely had a hurdle to get over together around the labor part of it. And they would articulate, like, I don't want to labor, I don't want to slave, I'm not a slave, I won't do this work. And that felt like a super important place to have that conversation around, like, what does labor work feel like when you're working for something that benefits you and your family, and how is that different from slavery? And so, yeah, I love being out in nature with kids, and to let them make the meaning, to let them let their senses help them make the meaning of it. And we got to take a busload of youngsters out to a cherry farm, and they listened as hard as they could to lessons about cherries and how you store apples and stuff like that. They were, they were flatting flies and they were swatting flies and, dealing with the heat and trying not to talk. But then they were like, go, you can pick as many cherries as you want. And they had these paper bags, and they were like up to their waist in cherry trees. They were just like little legs and sneakers. And they just filled these bags up, and they were like laying in the grass, and they were spitting the seeds as far as they could. And it just was like, one of them was like, we're gonna have a whole forest of cherry trees, and they were spitting the seeds somewhere. Anyway, that moment will stick with me forever, because I think that it was about it mattering to them. They had to listen through the stuff that it's important to know or whatever, but also why does it matter to have these sort of sensory experiences and these sort of to be able to pull fruit off of a tree is an experience that not every kid gets to have, and it makes you have a different relationship with that place and that experience.
Yeah, so you've made memories and changed lives. I think this really changes people, those experiences that you have as children. I know that a lot of my work personally comes from, when I was 8. Say it's like I'm an adult stuck in an 8-year-old's mind, but I think that's what forms us, and that we mightn't realize it until a lot later, that it's those, and they could be as incidental as, the smallest thing. You don't know what's going to have the ripple effects. And
I think we're our best selves at 8 years old, because it's this mixture of the beginnings of autonomy and doing what we want, you know what I mean? And also where everything's possible. And 8-year-olds are particularly nice. I don't know, 8-year-olds have they have that really nice, I don't know. I wish we could all
be each other. Are there any 8-year-olds here today?
Well, everyone is at their best. We're all kind of 8 years.
Yeah. Should I read a little bit? Or? Yeah. So I did write an afterword. I think I already said that I don't think of myself as a writer because I'm a visual artist. But I've worked with language for a long time, and you know, being Irish, we've got this baggage of Joyce and Beckett. I'm actually translating Ulysses right now into Irish trees. So I have been working with language in a way that I guess I feel like language is alive. To me, it's like a three-dimensional, no, more than three-dimensional. It's like this multiverse. And I love that we've got this word help that's hanging up in this space, because it literally is like there's this three-dimensional, those letters are up there. Because I feel, you know, when I make drawings, you're seeing a lot of my drawings whizzing past on these images, and a lot of them are just pencil or pen on paper, right? So that's, it seems like it's a very flat thing, but when I make a mark, I feel around it, and so some of the tree drawings I made into large three-dimensional objects. So one large one that was made for the Contemporary Art Museum St. Louis was just recycled trash, you call it here, rubbish I call it in Ireland, just recycled and taped together. And it's the same with, so I guess with words I feel the same, but also, you know, a drawing for me could be a walk or a conversation. That's another way of taking a line for a walk. So yeah, wrestling with language, with the actual writing part of it was, yeah, maybe one reason I made a tree alphabet was as a frustrated writer. That could be maybe one way that I've seen why I made a tree alphabet. But then I thought, okay, when I made the book about, excuse me, when I made the book about trees, I didn't include any text at all. There was nothing. It was just a collection, like a collage, a gathering together of voices. And I thought, as an artist, I can do that because you make an exhibition and you might have the wall label or something, but usually you don't have to write an essay. But then I realized there were so many messages. You know, I have, for my book tour, I have these T-shirts that Laurie Arbiter makes under a project. It's a visual art project called We Will Not Be Silent. And so today it's a radical imagination sets us free, but I have a lot of other messages, and I'm wearing them. I also have the extinction, you can't see it, but maybe later. The extinction symbol is carved into my head, and I have the climate strike. This is the extinction symbol too. So I feel like since 2016, everything I'm wearing is like a message. So I have to constantly be screaming the messages because that's how I feel on the inside. So all of that is a long-winded way of saying I wrote something for this book and put it in, it's at the very end, so it's the afterword. And I'll read a few pieces from it. It's called Another World is Possible. This book is a love letter to our vanishing world, written with trees. I've always felt like a plant person, moss and lichen covered, the land a part of me and me of it. The Irish landscape I grew up in is riddled with stone walls and stories, 70,000 place names and countless fairy trees. Irish place names are derived from hidden histories or trees that used to grow there, ghost forests. Dar means oak and is found in many place names around Ireland. Townlands contain kill, Irish for cell or church, demonstrating how intimately entwined our very selves are with the Catholic Church. In the first experiment in colonization, our language was beaten out of us. We had to learn in secret hedge schools. Ireland's medieval Ogham, sometimes called a tree alphabet, used trees for letters. The characters were called feda, trees, or nin, 14 branches, due to their shapes. This ancient writing was read from the ground up, each character sprouting from a central line, like branches on a tree. Written on bark, it is no coincidence that some of the first forms of writing use trees. Our capacity to produce language is innate, like a tree's ability to produce leaves. Buds burst with potential stories, words are alive, emerging from and evolving with culture. What if we plant living time capsules with secret messages written to our future selves? Why not make our words matter by planting them? We could seed secret messages of resistance, plant blooming poems, and cultivate landscapes of renewal. Then I go on and talk about the tree alphabet, blah, blah, blah. Oh yes, I just want to mention this about the rights of nature. A few years before I was born, and I keep talking, you know, returning to time and this notion of deep time or tree time, and the fact that I'm thinking about my own lifespan on the planet. So a few years before I was born, Christopher Stone, a professor of law at the University of Southern California, had an epiphany while speaking with his students. What if trees, like people, had rights? I am quite seriously proposing that we give legal rights to forests, oceans, rivers, and other so-called natural objects in the environment, he wrote. Today, the movement to recognize these rights of nature is inspiring people around the world, with indigenous communities leading the way. Almost all successful rights of nature cases so far protect bodies of water. Why not trees? I asked Paul Polazan, founder of Law for Nature, and he told me, I'm not aware of the draft rights of trees in general, as they seem more difficult to conceptualize than rivers. But I believe we will soon see rights for forests and trees. The climate emergency demands that we learn the language of trees and speak on their behalf. Learning other languages creates empathy, compelling us to reconsider our relationships with other beings. If trees have memories, respond to stress, and communicate, what can they tell us, and will we listen? Listening, speaking, reading, and writing are how humans communicate and make sense of the world. The alphabet is how we organize information and knowledge. Our networked world depends on it. Trees, the font, lets us renew our relationship with language, landscape, perception, time, memory, and reading itself by slowing the reader down to decipher words in the woods. Maybe one last thing. About the alphabet. The alphabet is magic, a way to love the world intimately. With these 26 little letters, we can create any word in the universe. Letters of the alphabet are like seeds planted on a blank page. I offered the tree alphabet as a gift for those who want to fall in love with the world by rewilding their words. Learning the language of trees can help us think like the multicellular organisms that we are, inspiring new ways to live and work together. Trees can help us rewrite the broken stories that we've been telling ourselves. Today, in this time of planetary emergency, we need to reread origin stories and rediscover other ways of living in harmony with our kin. Beautiful reimaginings are happening everywhere. People are rewilding, reforesting, restoring, and creating radical hope. I offer the language of trees as a celebration of trees and our entangled relationship with them. I hope this book inspires us to consider how our human nature might re-merge with the state of nature. This book is also a call to action. An ecological civilization based on rights of nature is a survival imperative. Please join me in declaring emergency and advocating for the rights of nature, the rights of trees, forests, peatlands, rivers, and planet Earth. And I'll stop there. Join me. I wish I had a t-shirt for everyone.
Well, I appreciate the ending because it really articulates your vision for what this book might give the world and how it might be. Are you seeing people? You're just beginning your tour, but I wonder how folks are responding to the book. Are you?
Well, I think even before the book was published, like I mentioned, because the book about trees came out almost 10 years ago, and the tree drawings are out there. So my tree world drawings exist in the world. So I feel like for years I've been getting messages from people about how inspiring it, and also with the New York City Tree Alphabet and the Irish Tree Alphabet, I try to make it public, like with the Parks Department and whatever way possible, so that it's available for people to use, so that it is a tool in a way. And so people will message and hope that their messages will get planted. And it just feels like it's something that you use this crack open. It feels like it cracks open people's hearts and minds. That's really how it feels, like for real, and with the messages that I get. So this was all before the book even came out, and so now that the book is in the world, for like a week or almost 2 weeks maybe, it just has been really heartwarming to see that, because when you know what it's like when you're working on a book and you're making it, you're so close to it, and you want it to do all of these things, but you're like, oh, then it'll go out, will it make it onto a bookshelf, will anyone see it, will it disappear, maybe people won't see the beauty and the joy in it that I see in it. So it feels like the response that I've been getting is all incredibly beautiful and powerful. So hopefully it continues, like with your book.
Yeah, it's been exciting. It's been fun to have it be something that I can share with people.
It's like a journey, right?
Yeah, I get to talk more about it than just the elevator speech version of it. It's nice to get into it with folks and to see how it is living in different places. It's been great.
Mm-hmm. And is there anything concrete, apart from like a book tour and you traveling, whizzing around speaking, are there more classes or educational toolkits? Is there anything like that?
Yeah, folks are excited to teach it in the fall, and so we're developing some things so that we might engage with students. I've done a few college, campus visits that have been really nice. And I'm gonna be in Buffalo with the book for most of May. And I get to work with the new group of teenagers that are working on the farm, and we're gonna write together, and they're gonna have their own reading of their work, their nature writing, with a local theater company. So I'm really excited about that.
That's awesome. What date in May? Because I'm going to be in Buffalo.
I'll be there from the 9th to the 16th and the 20th to the 27th or something like that.
Does that overlap? Does that when we're there?
Oh, cool.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, because do you know Patty Krolick?
I do.
Yes, she's going to join me in conversation.
Awesome. That's so fun.
And then we go to the art park
Oh,
for a
yeah.
weekend.
Oh, that's so good. That's so fun.
Workshops.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to.
We'll catch up with each other there.
Oh,
Totally.
I love it. That of all the places in the world, because I've never been to Buffalo.
Oh, it's a great town. It's it was a spectacular town, I think, around the turn of not this last century. I have to figure out a way of saying that. It was the site of the 1901 the Pan American Exposition, the World's Fair, and first electrified city. Had it's a gorgeous town, lots of really incredible Victorian architecture. It has gone through a lot of disinvestment, and so it's a town that went from having nearly 1 million people to having 260,000 people. So it's rewilding in an interesting way, because there are over 30,000 vacant parcels in the city, and so that's partly why we were able to farm so much there, is because there was an acre of land in the middle of the houses in our neighborhood, and so I hope that you get to explore it. It's so cool. I'm excited to see the new Albright Knox, the new art museum is opening there, and I'm excited for that. I also get to go see the Minnesota Lynx play in Toronto, which is women's basketball. It's my favorite thing.
You lost me there.
Sorry. But that'll be fun for me, maybe.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. I am so happy that the timing might work and I'll get to visit your farm.
Yeah, I hope you too. It's great. When I was working there, we grew it from this one lot into an acre of land, several lots connected, and young people were growing about 70 varieties of fruits, vegetables, and herbs. We had a little orchard. We were composting big scale with chickens and ducks, and they had an aquaponics system where we hand dug. Oh, it's wild. Your early 20s is a wild time. We hand dug a swimming pool, basically, and we found a house in the hole, because they had demoed the house into its foundation, so it was it was amazing. It was an amazing experience with teenagers to be like, what are we finding? And then we put this swimming pool in, and we started raising tilapia and largemouth bass in this closed aquaponic system. So we're selling greens to restaurants, and then the young people made their own salad dressing and salsas, and we have a mobile market that was driving all over town, bringing groceries to folks, and they were doing public education. And then I was there, we got to dream into what would the future look like. We want to have a farm, a regional farm center, and we want to have an apartment for interns, and we want to have a teaching kitchen. And it was a wild dream, an unachievable dream. And then we were a part of a local competition where the kids got to make their own presentation, and they won $250,000. And we're like, maybe. And then we're like, we can't build that building with $250,000. It's not enough money. So we left Buffalo before it was even a possibility. It was sort of we had the seed of it, but we weren't sure what was going to happen. And now it's a thing. And I've stepped inside of my dream. It's so wild. So we sat down and we were like, whoa, we could do this up here and this there. We want to have cold storage and maybe a root cellar, and it's all there. So you should definitely come by and see. Last time I was there, they had baby cows visiting the farm. I don't know. It's
I'm
wild.
totally
So,
I might have to add on extra days.
yes,
to make
totally.
sure. Wow, that is wonderful. Have you written about taking the swimming pool?
It's so I have my next book is a different thing, but the third book I think is a YA novel where kids actually get sucked through a time travel hole in a while digging a hole in a farm, and maybe they wake up in the 1901 Pan American Exposition,
Oh, really?
and the Pan Am had a like full-scale replica slave plantation that people could tour and go to a daily minstrel show and a cakewalk and watch them perform. Anyway, I'm excited to think about it. It's like just a seed, but we'll be down the road.
So right now you're working on the next book, and then
Yeah,
the YA
that's
stuff.
the next one.
Okay. But they don't happen in parallel. You're not working.
I need to like get into this. Anyway, the second book has to be a certain point before I can really say I'm starting the third book. I've already written some of it.
As a visual artist, I get to work on lots of different. Not that I get to, but I end up working on lots of projects at the same time in parallel. These would kind of happen at the same time, but separating the book seems like such a big deal. Working on them at the same time is completely different.
I sort of like the momentum of having more than one project going, because then I'm like, I don't go from like I could write today or I could scroll on TikTok or whatever. I'm like I could write this project or this project. It has to be at the right stage of the project for me to hold things. So both of them.
Should we do questions?
Yeah, that'd be a good time. We have probably 10 minutes for questions.
Does anyone have questions?
My question is for you, and in your anthology, were there any you talked about complicated relationships in nature, were there any conflicted thinking stuff that made it into the book? And what was your relationship with allowing those stories to?
Yeah, I wanted the range of relationships to nature to be reflected. Because I think that nature is a very complicated place in the U.S. for Black folks because of lots of historical significant things, right? Our relationship to land has to do with the years and years of redlining, years and years of Jim Crow laws, and years of sundowner towns, and all that stuff has to do with how folks relate to nature, and that sort of push and pull of how much physical labor is invested into nature, but it not being something that we have owned, historically owned, or really had control over. And so I'd say several of the essays in the collection have that sort of tension in them, have the one in particular I can think of, Katie Robinson, who's a local poet and thinker and awesome person, is really around the relationship with fear and nature, and like her particular fear of bugs and insects and nature, and how that is actually teaching her, and like she's stretching based on the way she's engaging with her fear. So I checked that one out. I think that Carolyn Finney, who wrote that foreword to the book, the introduction to the collection, not the introduction, the foreword. Those words, they're kind of interchangeable, but she wrote the foreword, I think. Was really about the heartbreak of losing, in particular, a tree that was on land that her parents had stewarded for her whole life, but was under the ownership of white folks who then sold the land, and they lost connection to the land altogether. And she went back to visit, and someone had cut down their family, like this tree that illustrates so much about their family. So I think that there is this balance of folks finding liberative experiences in nature and also confronting the structural racism that's at play and in nature here in the U.S. Both things. Thanks for asking. Are there other questions?
Hi. Okay, so this isn't fully formed, Katie, but I'm gonna try. So, have you seen the movie Arrival?
Yes.
Or read that story by Ted Chiang?
I saw the movie
Okay.
with the octopus language.
Yeah. So, like, in order to, like, solve the challenge, she she had to like learn the language, and then the language changed how she thought, and then changing how she thought gave her what she needed to solve the trees. Like, you know, your journey with trees, have you noticed how you think changing and in what ways? I have a follow-up question for you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thanks for the question. It's funny, this is the first time anyone's, I don't know if you all heard, but it was a question about the movie Arrival, and there's this strange language that is sort of these squid-like, it's produced in, it's visual gobbledygook in a way. I'm not really describing it at all. And it changes how she thinks when this scientist learns the language. So is that related to maybe to what I've been doing with the Tree Museum? When I saw that movie, I wanted to see it specifically because of this language. I forget now, was it an alphabet or a whole new language? I can't remember the details. But when I watched it, I thought, if they see my, not the tree alphabet, but the stone alphabet, because I've also made a stone alphabet, which is like an infinite alphabet. It doesn't correlate to the A to Z. Because visually it looked like it felt like the work that I'd been doing. And what I hope with these alphabets is that it does change how your brain kind of works, and it slows you down. Definitely want you to slow you down when you're typing with trees. You kind of, you know, oh, I pressed A. That's what it is. And the same thing when you're reading the book. Like on some of the pages you can see a letter for letter, tree for tree translation. So it's easy to follow along. Like here, for example, on these, the chapter headings, so you can learn as you go. And even the actual tree alphabet pages itself, which, you know, I've made posters, so then you can hang it up. So a lot of, to go back to the impact issue, I've had a lot of families get in touch saying that having the posters is a lovely way for the kids to learn to identify. And kids like puzzles. Not to be, you know, break it down by gender, but I've been told that a lot of boys who puzzle, I know girls also puzzle, I love puzzling, love figuring it out, and then you can do the translation and the coding. But the slowing down, and so yes, hopefully it will change brains and how we think, and maybe also to get beyond our human brains. This was something I was really interested in, because I think we're so, you know, this, the myth of human supremacy, like we are the humans at the top of the pyramid, and we are better than all these other animals, the millions of animals that we share the planet with. So it was just a simple way of throwing out this a way to maybe tap and say, who are we humans? There are all these other species who are communicating, we just can't maybe hear them, because we're not evolved enough. Like we are less evolved. We have to slow down slow down the whale song so that we can hear?
I was just, there's a new show on Apple TV, I think, called...
Don't say that.
Oh no, it's not good.
The future one?
The future one.
Extrapolations?
I've only watched 2 episodes, but the one...
You can't watch anymore.
Are you
right?
done?
I couldn't watch anymore.
Oh, I
Sorry.
felt like I was so excited about the idea of the ways that whales thought about. Like, yeah, the globe, thought about the world, thought about time, thought about human concepts like deception.
But did you think the TV show worked?
I don't know. I don't know that I need to decide that myself. That's not usually how I approach TV shows. I'm usually like balancing like my TV production brain and like and story construction and thinking how is this working, and I don't know. I was doing a puzzle while I was watching it. But there is an interesting conversation that happens between humans and whales in there, which was manipulated because the whale is given a human voice, a personal relationship voice, which I think makes it complicated. And
especially
so,
a famous Hollywood actor.
Yeah, and in the relationship, the parent of the person who is talking to them. But yeah, it felt like that piece was manipulated in a way that wasn't fully explored, but also the concept of like whether or not whales understand about lies, because do whales lie? I don't know.
Well, it's funny, we're getting into the whales and the other species, because I was at one of the bookstores on the tour, I think it was Broadway Books in Portland, so I was just signing books. We didn't have an event, and we were looking at all the new the whale books and owl books. So there are a lot of whale and owl books right now, and I think it's connected to all of this. That there's, we're looking at nature and other species. So there's been a glut of tree books. Maybe nobody needs another tree book, but over the years, we're in this moment where we are seeing. I think COVID obviously blew that out of the water because we had to have this new relationship or a deeper relationship with the world around us. But I don't know if that goes away from the follow-up question that you had.
Oh, if someone else has a question.
We probably have time for one more question.
Did you?
So you have at least two versions of your tree alphabet.
There's three. So there's the original in the book, and then there's the New York City one and the Irish one.
Okay. For any of them, how do you choose from the multitude of trees that start with that letter?
Yeah.
Like what sort of decision making or process did you go
Well,
through?
so the original tree alphabet that I used for the book had to be made very quickly because the designers, that book about trees was published by Broken Dimanche Press in Berlin, and we needed, because I knew the book had to come out in September 2015 for my 40th birthday. I didn't tell anybody, I just said for the Printed Matter Art Book Fair in New York in September, we need the book in September. And that meant the designers needed the font, because you can't make the book without the font, like that week.
Okay.
So I literally had to sit down, I had my piece of paper, and I wrote A, B, C, D, the whole alphabet on the left-hand side, and then I said, okay, because, I had no idea what a tree alphabet was. I thought maybe just keep it simple. So A could be apple. Any tree that began with that letter, I would write it down, and then there's obviously X, Y, Z. These are complicated letters to find a word or a tree name. And I made it happen using Latin names for some of them. But it was that's how simple. It had to be made really quickly, and I had to find somebody. My friend Terry Berkowitz was a designer, and she asked one of her students who actually wanted to focus on fonts. That was her project that she'd set herself. She had no idea how to make fonts, so she used it as like a teaching aid, which was super. It was great. It just meant it was kind of, I'm kind of embarrassed, or I find it kind of clunky. This alphabet, kind of crude, because it's not very elegantly taking the fine. Because with the font, letters are the way they are because they're simple and graphic. They're glyphs that can be easily seen and read and understood. That's how they need to work. And it's hard when you have tree drawings with all these little branches and the twigs, and as an artist I want to get all of those lines in there. They have to disappear, and it has to become a crude, thick line. With the New York one and the Irish tree alphabet, we were able to finesse a little bit more because the designers had longer. But it's funny, a lot of the trees in this original tree alphabet overlap with the New York City and the Irish one because they're trees that I know. And I know the ones that are in those areas because, Ireland and North America would have been stuck together back in Pangea, so there are similarities with the climate. Not all trees, but a lot of them are overlapping. If, I did this in Australia, it would be completely different. And California or another planting. So, but it was a very practical exercise in a way.
Okay. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Erin.
I'm very excited for at some point planting pallets will happen. Just to see an orchard.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, good to meet you.
And thanks again for the books.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. This is amazing. Totally mind-blowing, actually. Yeah. So, thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's okay. I've done that to my laptop.
I know. I get to see him once